Okay, everybody, this is the pre-recorded screencast that I mentioned in my schedule, and for the week of April 1st to April 5th. And this will be posted in the announcements for each class. We finished up last week. We worked with pivot tables, and this week we're going to work with getting started in Access. We have 6 cases in Access that we're going to look at, and we'll be using a textbook that's devoted to learning how to utilize Access. I've found over the years that most students I have are pretty good, have a fairly good to very good range of skills saved with Excel, but very few understand much about Access or databases. And databases like spreadsheets have now become a key technology. And as I've said in class several times, we're seeing that the 2 of those are being merged into some platforms like, for example, Tableau, which is a hybrid, what I call hybrid platform, or SAS Visual Analytics is another one. Now, just to do some logistics, I'm going to get us started on the modules. Now, everybody understand, I'm over here in section A, but this video is going to apply to both sections. And so we're over here at week number 9, and we've already completed the Excel cases. So you should have uploaded all of those. We did 13 Excel cases, and we're going to do 6 Microsoft Access cases. Now, the reason we work with that with Access is very simple. It is highly intuitive. It's really designed as a starter or introduction to using a database. And Access is an excellent tool because just about every other commercial product out there that is a database is drawn from Microsoft Access. So we're going to see some ways in which we use a database to collect some data about a business problem. And then once we've done that, if we want to, we're in a position then to go ahead and take that data and put it into an application, say, for example, like a spreadsheet, and where we can analyze it, do some computational work, as well as do some visual work, like create a chart, that type of thing. So at the end of each module, you'll notice I've had the point distribution for the course, which shows you how many points there are for each of the types of assignments, the total points for the course, resources for quizzes and exams, the resources for Microsoft Excel cases, and now we're going to take a look at this resources for Access cases. And click that, and then we'll download it. Okay. And as was the case, as was the case with Excel, I have this file that walks you through each case, okay, the business problem and the database skill set that we're working with. It's here in column B. Then an example file. These are old cases that I've worked on. This is just the same as we did with Excel. I take some old cases that I've worked on. They're more fully developed and walk you through them as part of the work for workshop credits. Then I have a file over in the Lambert and Cox text, and that's from its companion site. And these are files you can upload for the workshop credit. Now, I also have those files in Canvas so that you can access them, so that you can get to them. Then the related material in the Lambert and Cox text. So it's the same thing we did with Excel. We have 6 access cases. Now we have a few of them because we're really going to deal with just the very fundamentals of access. Now it's important to understand that you use databases all of the time and often are not even cognizant that you're doing it. And anything that lets me search for something and find it, or anything that lets me search for something, find it, and then extract it and store it, or anything that allows me to store information that I want to keep together in one place because it's all related, that's a database. Databases are everywhere. And as I've said before, as you go out to work, you'll work on your company or wherever you go to work, you'll have a dashboard. And that dashboard is the linkage of 2 technologies. It's the linkage of a database and some kind of spreadsheet or computational tool like an Excel, okay? And what you'll see on that dashboard is going to be what we call a KPI, key performance indicators. So we're just going to we're going to put our toe in the water just a little bit with access. Now, let me say this. Access, I don't know. I know that the VMware at OBU has access. If you have access on your computer, I would be surprised because it would mean you probably have the premium or the professional development or the professional version of Office Productivity Suite. So let me say this also, if you're a Mac user, there's Office for Mac, but it does not have a database component to it. It does not have access. So folks, you're going to have to be mindful of that as we work through these cases. And that means you're probably going to have to do quite a bit more work over in the lab than you may have been used to, either the library lab or the BBC lab. Now, let's take a look at the textbook for just a moment. And I have my virtual copy over here at Vital Source. And this is the Lambert and Cox text. All right. And we're going to see that it walks you through step by step, as it says, how to work with databases, but with access, how to develop tables, and then how to develop forms that we use to put into tables, how to create a thing called a query, which is how we get data out of a table, and reports and all kinds of things. And we're going to use this text just like we did the text on Excel, so that if you want to see a step by step case that allows you to look at a list of things to do, then you're going to have that, okay? And we'll be using different parts of this text as we work on the cases, all right? Now, what I also want to do is, before we start in earnest, my intention was to, in this lecture, to just talk some about databases and a key concept out there called the data warehouse, okay? And another concept or a term that you'll hear, a data mart. Another term you're going to hear is, we've talked about it, the analytic cube, and we worked with that and talked about that when we worked with pivot tables. And the next step from a pivot table is a full-blown what we call a relational database. And we're going to talk about what one of those are and how they work. So we're going to see an example of one that's workable. Microsoft has put together a database. It's called Northwind Traders, and it's intended to provide a model or a full-scale version of a access database that you can see what it's all about. You can try it before you drive it or learn very much about it. And I can tell you that when you leave this class, and then if you take the data administration class, which almost all business majors do, by the time you leave, your skill sets will be far above those of the typical business student who's out there applying for a job. Most of them are very good at using spreadsheets, but they don't know much at all about databases, because in many business schools, the faculty there still just don't really understand that this technology of a database is a powerful technology that is being constantly reworked. There's two things that are going on, and think of it, they're going in one's going up and one's going down. One of them is that these databases, these applications like a SAS, Visual Analytics, like SAP, Oracle, those kinds of products that you're going to hear out there are becoming easier and easier and easier for the average person to use. So you don't have to be a programmer or a computer scientist to use them, okay? While that's happening, the capacity of those applications is going up. We can do things on the desktop that people only dreamed about doing 25 or 30 years ago. And that's because of this advent of what we call object-oriented programming, the use of a graphic interface, windows, icons. And so we're in a point in time where the folks who understand how to use a database to produce information are those who will be ahead of the game. So we're going to take a look at that example, and then we'll start to work through we will work through the cases. Now, let's go over into the files, and if I'm not mistaken, I have a file over there called Northwind Traders. And so we'll do this. There it is. And this is Northwind Traders. It's called Northwind 2007. And it's an access database. Okay. And we're going to download it. And then we're going to talk about what it is, how it's put together. Now, I'm going to show it in the folder. And you'll see here's also a file called Northwind Traders. This is Northwind 2007, so we'll throw it down here on the desktop. Okay. Now, before we open it up and get into it, I also want to take just a couple of minutes and talk about the Lambert text. And I know that all of you are going to say, well, okay, what should I be looking at or reading? Well, obviously, when we're going to work on a particular case, you ought to be tuned in to that passage or text passage where we have a database case and we are given a step-by-step explanation of what to do. This is the same thing we did with Excel. I would recommend that the first thing you do is take a careful look at the introduction, okay? And also take a look at part 1 and part 2. Now, as you can see, for the first access case we'll do, which is we'll look at Northampton abrasives, that's one of my old cases. And then Garden 01, that's covered in pages 28 to 43 and then 74 to 89. So you're going to want to look at those pages. But I'd say also just read along chapter by chapter, part by part, so that you could kind of have a good sense of what's going on as we work through the case. All right. And the Lambert text is very good. It shows you screenshots. It walks you through step by step, as the book is titled, and it really does help you understand what a database can do. Now, I can tell you this: once you've gotten familiar with Access and using it, and you lose some of the fear or trepidation you might have, when you go to work and, well, when you're interviewed for a job and an employer says to you, have you ever worked with databases? You can say, yes, I worked with Access. And by the time you're through with our program, you can say, I've worked with Oracle. I worked with SAS Visual Analytics. I'm familiar with SAP. That employer's head's going to explode because they're going to know they've got somebody who's exceptionally proficient in databases. By the time you go through our program, you'll know more about databases than 85 to 90% of people out there working. And that's important because databases are becoming the foundational tool in which we are able to get data, capture it, extract it, so we can analyze it and visualize it and use it to make decisions. Okay? So that's a little bit of guidance I wanted to give you there as far as using the Lambert text. And I'll just give you just a quick, and we'll show you the files for each of these. Okay. And of course, if you want, you can get an ebook like I have. And the book it's very, 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 very simple language. Okay. Now they talk about Access 2013. I understand that there are some other database products out there, but I really believe if you want to learn how to drive a car, I've used that analogy before, you'll learn Access, because Access is really the database that everybody else, all the other commercial products out there are based on, are derived from and have those features and functions. Okay? So you'll want to have the text if you haven't gotten it, and you'll want to be using it. Okay. Now, we downloaded Northwind Traders, okay? And let's open it up. And it's called Northwind 2007, but it's about a company called Northwind Traders. All right? And let's start very first with this. Microsoft has done a nice job of providing you a sample database. You could take this database itself and put in your own data, and you'd have a database ready to go. When Microsoft originally invented Access, they could not have foreseen a couple of things. Maybe they did. Who knows? The incredible amount of data that are being produced. Every 2 years, we create as much data as we've created in the history of the world. That is an enormous amount of stuff. And it's all kinds of data. A large portion of it is from sensors, that have been placed in devices like cars, refrigerators, all of that. We have all of these social media out here generating incredible amounts of data. And so businesses are just overwhelmed because they're swimming in all this a tremendous amount of data from which they need to extract information, from which they need to extract some knowledge and eventually get what we call some business wisdom, some timeless kinds of principles by which they can operate. Well, I'm going to click enable, okay, and you'll want to save this to your desktop. Okay, and they have a little login. Don't worry about that. Just click login. And here we have a dashboard. You've heard me talk about dashboards several times. You remember when we went back and we worked on that case in Excel where we created macros, which are nothing more than copying keystrokes. And we took it, and then we inserted some forms or little objects, okay? And then we assigned a macro to each of those objects, and then we could automate our spreadsheet, all right? And so here we have a dashboard. Now, this tells me what are some key performance indicators that I want to know about. Key performance indicators typically are those that are focused upon what we would call the internal operations of the company. If I'm a sales company like Northwind Traders, I'm focused upon inventory levels, pending sales, that type of data, because the key transaction is selling stuff and getting paid. If I'm in another business, I'm going to have a dashboard that looks at other kinds of things. Now, with dashboards today, we've also incorporated an additional element if you're at the particular, if you're at a high level in the company, or if you are a company owner. And that's what we call an executive support system. Sometimes people will have a thing called a decision support system. These are applications that tell us what's going on in the outside world, that a company uses to monitor its competitors, monitor the economic environment, etc. And those are used to help make decisions about what to do in the face of certain conditions. We've done a little bit of that when we worked in the case where you remember we did that capital budgeting case, and we used the data table function in Excel where we looked at various levels of interest rate and various levels of annual cash flows to see what was the profitability index, okay, where we looked at, okay, how worthwhile is it for us to run this project? And we took the net present value of the project and divided it by the initial investment to come up with that index. And as you remember, as we looked at all those cells, we used conditional formatting, and we could see that the higher the interest rate, okay, the lower the amount of, the lower the productivity level, unless we had high levels of income, and vice versa. Okay. So we're going to talk about that type of thing as we go through the course. Now, one of the key things to understand about a database is that it's got some very simple components, and we'll talk about how they all work together. But I wanted to alert you to this dashboard, because you're going to hear a lot of people about dashboards this, dashboards that. When you're interviewing for a job, probably if you're at a large company, they'll say, now, how familiar are you with working with the dashboard? And a dashboard, look, dashboards in business are not much different than the dashboard in your car. Okay? When you drive your car, you do not get a readout on every single aspect of every single thing functioning in your car. Okay? You'd be overwhelmed. You just couldn't do it. You'd have too much to look at. So, as folks have designed automobiles, as they've designed the dashboard, they've created them in a way that focus you on the important stuff, like how much fuel do I have? Do I have enough gas to get me from point A to point B? How fast am I going? What's the engine pressure, the compression? Another thing would be some of these safety things, like, is there a door open? What about some things like how high or low do I have the settings on my wipers when it rains? Do I have the high beams on my lights? How many miles are on this car? What's the oil pressure level? These are general types of things that just tell you, okay, here's kind of how things are going on with the car. And sometimes you'll get a service warning light that says, hey, you need to take me in and get me serviced. Okay. And you might often, like I do, you'll go scrambling for the owner's manual to say, what does this mean? And the owner's manual, hopefully you should have one with your vehicle. It will tell you what that means. Okay. So here we have a dashboard, and let's look at what they have. First of all, this is a sales organization, so it makes sense. They say, okay, how many active orders have we got? Okay. What are recent sales, and what was the date we sold them? And what was the date, and who is the customer? Then we come over to, okay, well, if we're concerned about selling stuff, we got to make sure we got something to sell. So we got to do some inventory control. So we have an inventory to reorder part of our dashboard, and how much is available and how much we need to order. And we have that by all of our products, every single one. And we even have reorder levels. And you say, boy, that sounds familiar. Yeah, you remember the case where we used the economic order quantity. I think it was called hardware nuts, that case, where we used the EOQ, the economic order quantity model, to determine how much we should order. We used conditional statements to determine whether or not we ought to order. And we used the EOQ to determine how much to order. Okay? And we had a spreadsheet that had all these different parts and how many were in a given component and all that business. Then we've got some quick links over here. You'll see these: view the inventory, view the orders, view customers, view purchase orders. That is what's in the pipeline that people are buying, view our suppliers, employees, shippers, and sales reports. This is a dashboard. That's all this is about. That's all it's intended to do or to be. Okay? Well, I'm going to close that off, and we're going to talk about the parts of a database and how a database is put together. Now, I want you to stop for a moment and take a look at this. Access and all modern database technologies utilize a thing called the GUI, the GUI, the graphic user interface, which is a real fancy way of saying I have an icon or a symbol for every single thing connected with this. And this is a again, kind of like a dashboard. The amount of programming that's behind all of this would absolutely amaze you. It's tens of billions of code. And when you and I open up Access today, here in 2019, we open up a tool that in 1990 would have been considered, or 1995 would have been considered the top of the line. Few companies in the world had this type of application on their desktop, because there weren't that many folks who had a desktop or a laptop, and much less tablets. And databases were still very, very really the province of people over in the IT department who you would tell them, here's what I need to know, and then they'd go run the program. That's not the case anymore. Although if you get to larger organizations, you'll have an IT department with whom you'll interface. Or if you're in a small company and you buy a particular application from a company, you'll have somebody who's your liaison or your customer service rep, whatever. Well, every database has the following things. It has objects that are known. It has these types of objects, tables, okay? And I'm over here in the shutter bar, and you can see them. Actually, I lied. We've got more than 4, but all databases will have these 4 things. They'll have tables. That's where we store data. They'll have forms. Those are objects by which we enter data into a table, and so we make the data entry very intuitive, and we make sure data are entered in a way that we want them to be entered. Then we have a query. A query is a question. Query systems or query tools are designed to help us extract data from a database. You say it cannot be this easy. Yes, it is. This is the whole concept. Now, to get to where we were when I started, the very first database program I ever worked with was a program a long time ago, back when I was working as a doctoral student, and it's been a long time ago, and you did a lot of programming. You wrote a lot of code just to get the system to let you access that tool. And it was purely a tool to search for things and to find them. Okay. And now the reports, that's pretty intuitive. That's pretty obvious. That's the output. So think of it as tables where I store stuff. Then a query is, so the table is an input. We're thinking what we call systems kind of thinking. And the table is an input. Then a query is a process. And then the report is an output. Okay? You have a couple of things, macros and modules. The macro you're very familiar with. We did that in Excel when we worked on that case where we created the macros and we recorded the keystrokes. We went down and we looked at Visual Basic at the Visual Basic level for Excel. And then we have modules, which are a series of macros put together. Now, we're not going to work with macros or modules in Access. And I'm going to say this. These types of objects are fine, okay? And it's the same thing I said to you when we worked with Excel. If you really want to get and really try to tailor an Excel workbook, you'll want to take the time to go and learn Visual Basic for Excel. We went down and looked at the code. I showed it to you. It's not that difficult to do, okay? but I don't know how valuable it's going to be for you as a decision maker. Okay, I really don't. Just extracting the data that you need to get. In the 13 cases that we've covered, we ended up with using pivot tables, which are a prelude to using databases. As I told you at the time, in any spreadsheet application, a pivot table or a tool like it, an optimization tool like Optimizer in Microsoft Excel, or the random function are the three most powerful tools for spreadsheets, and they're complete and total game changers. If I wanted to, for example, when we did the capital budgeting case, I could have utilized the random number tools in Excel, and I could have generated thousands of potential scenarios for that company. I can do that when we teach when in the management science course, okay, we talk about how do I, given the constraints I have, make the best decisions I have. See, hopefully this will start to piece things together for you. And I realize that you said, man, it's just all data, data. I understand that. I also understand that you live in a world where you're competing against companies that have mastered the ability to go out and get data and turn it into information. That is data for decision making. Take information and convert it to knowledge, which is information that can be replicated and is useful in a variety of situations, similar situations, and then call what I call wisdom, and that is a knowledge, pardon me, which is insights based on all that information, and then wisdom, which is more strategic and more long-term in terms of the insights about a company. You say, give me an example. Okay, if you're in the energy business, the most fundamental thing you know is that the price of oil and the price of natural gas and the price of coal, the price of commodities drive that industry. When the prices are high, the people in that industry gear up to make a sale. When the prices go down, the people get laid off, people quit drilling for oil, etc. That is probably the simplest I could give you. There are some other industries that are heavily regulated. And so what's going on in the regulatory environment impacts them tremendously. There are some industries that are totally and completely dependent upon weather. The one that comes to mind is big food or the agriculture industry. Today, when you talk about a farm, if you've worked on one, then you understand that growing food is a hazardous task because it's subject to so many variables like how good is the seeds I planted? How good is the soil? Do I get enough rain or enough sunshine? Am I going to get a hailstorm that comes in and destroys my crop? So that's an industry very, very dependent upon weather. Very dependent. The airline industry is the same way. You learn that, you gain that wisdom because you see enough data over time. Well, enough of that. But we have 4 basic tools that are in every single database. And I'm going to start with them kind of in the order where things happen. We have a form. Well, let's start with the tables. We have a table, and then we have a form, which is a tool that helps you put data in tables. Then we have queries, which we can run, okay? And then we have reports. Let's start with the tables because a table is the heart of every database. And a table is a place where I keep data but I make sure, and this is a process we call normalization and data structures, where we make sure that the data we put into a table is, number one, the right data, number two, in the right format. Okay? Let's open up and let's click on the tables and we'll see. Now let's start with the customers table, and we're going to click I'll click at that and I will open it up. Okay? Now I'm going to take this, you see the little shutter bar opener? Click that and you'll give yourself a more view. Now this is a table that has everything about our customers. The name of the company, and the last name, the first name, and the email address, and the title, and business phone number, etc., of all of the contact people, the people who are our contacts at those companies. Those are the folks we talk with when we make a sale. Then we have information, and then we have their business address. And notice over if they have a web page, we'd have we'd have the URL or the link to it. If we want, we can attach notes. So this table is all about our customers. Now, this is what I call kind of a kitchen sink for the simple reason that we have just about everything in here. Now, if this is what we would call strictly a normalized table, this is really about 3 or 4 tables all combined, but it's a beginning database. And one of the things that most folks do when they're working in their very first, or a company or an organization has their first database, and they really don't know what they're doing, they'll have these tables with all kinds of information that really could be broken down into some smaller, what we call dimension tables. But that's okay. Right now we have everything about our customers in here we want to know. These are our contacts. Okay. Now I'm going to click here. Notice up here in the far left-hand corner, see the little slide rule looking thing? This is if we want to look at the design view of the table. So we're going to click on that. Now, as you're out at work, you're probably not going to do much table design, except where you're in a meeting where you say, well, you know, I can't get in, I don't have any way to get information about blah, blah, blah. And if you're working at a company that's run well, and one that really knows how to handle its information technology and its information resources, they're going to say, well, let's go over and see what we've got in our tables. Maybe we need to give you access to certain tables. Or they go, we don't collect that. And that's when you have to say, okay, well, here's what I need. So tables are what we call slowly changing elements. That is, we really don't create a table unless we know we need to have a certain type of information. Now, this all becomes very powerful when we start to link tables together. Then we can do, and then at that point, we're getting the benefits of what we call a relational database, where we have 2 tables and we relate them and we pull data. Let's look at this. We have the ID and we have a data type. So I say this is kind of an exercise. And an auto number means every time I create a record, it creates a new number. I do this to make sure that I don't duplicate records. And then over here is a description, which is optional. In the real world, if you worked for me and I opened up your database and I saw that there was nothing in here, who entered this, when it was created, what it's about, this is also known as the data dictionary. We'd be having a serious discussion. Then here we have the company, and this uses a form called short text, the last name, the first name. And this tells us, and we're all using short text information here. Now, let's look at a couple of things for a moment, okay? And I want to look at this thing called business phone. Click on that, okay? And we have what we call some field properties. Okay? Now, when we input data like a phone number, a business phone number, we could input that in a lot of different ways and create a nightmare for ourselves. So we can use a thing called an input mask. You look right here to make sure that when the data when we put in a phone number, it's controlled. It's put in a particular way that makes it easier for us to get it later on. Okay. Home phone number. And as you look down here at the bottom of these field properties, there's some key things that you'll see. Is this required? Do we allow a 0 length? Okay. Now I'm old school and I'm going to tell you this. You should not have a single, if you have a table, you should not have a single field in a table, i.e. a column, that you don't require to be collected. If you don't require it, get rid of it. Because what happens is you get what we call null values. And when you get a report and there's stuff missing from parts of it, like somebody's phone number or their address or this or that, you don't have a report, you have junk. Because you don't know if they don't have a phone number, for example, or you don't know if somebody forgot to put in the phone number. You don't know. And that creates an anomaly, meaning you kind of have a business level UFO. I don't know what I'm looking at, okay? I have an unidentified database object, if you want to call it like that. Well, let's go back up to the data sheet view. And here it is. We see that. We see the little icons. Those icons are also over here. I click on the tab. And we're going to close this. All right? Now we've taken a look at a table. And you can see we have on customers, employees, inventory transaction types, invoices, order details. Now we move down to some things like the order details, and these are what we call fact tables. This up here, employer, is what you could call a variable or a dimension table. And then down here, you have what we call a fact table because it has facts. You say, what are you talking? What do you mean? I'm going to click on the order table. The invoices is also in transactions. In transaction type, that's a dimension table. There'll be a good illustration for you. Then look at the inventory transactions. I'm going to open it up. And it's full of facts. The transaction number, the type of transaction that occurred, when was it created? Okay, we'll scoot that out here. Was it modified in any way? What product are we using? This invoice, this inventory transaction, what was the type of product? What was the quantity? What was the purchase order? If it has an ID, the customer ID, and any comments. But it's full of facts. It's what we call a fact table. I can add, subtract, multiply, divide because I have quantity of some kind. And these are records. Let's look at the design view and you'll see a record is really a combination of entries related to each of these fields. That's all that it is. All right, it changes. Now we'll save it. Okay. And you can see, I can go into somebody's database if I can have the access and I can see their tables and I can tell you a whole lot about how they do business, why they do business, etc. Because tables will contain dimensions, i.e. variables, characteristics, and they'll contain fact tables that tell me about the transactions and the elements of the transactions that are engaged for a company. Okay? You say it really couldn't be all that simple. Yes, it is. One of the things I've learned over all the time I've worked in business and government, and worked out with some non-governmental organizations, etc., I can tell you this. Doing the right thing or doing things the right way is typically the easiest, but the most difficult thing for people to do. I'm just going to tell you that right now, okay? One of the best examples is customer service. When a company gets a new customer, if they don't work to keep them, they're going to spend 25 times as much money to go get a new customer as they would to keep the old customer. And we know that when you have a customer and then you alienate them, they're going to go tell a whole bunch of people about you, what they don't like. The way it's done today is out on social media. Okay, and if you have if you want to say a particular car or something, go to the Facebook page, you'll see people complaining endlessly, and then somebody maybe from that company, if they're pretty savvy, answering saying, "We're sorry, Bill, that you had this problem. Blah blah. We'll try to fix it." Okay, so we've looked at these tables. Now we also have a table. We have a sales report. Okay, and we have a table on our shippers. And we have this table of strings. Let's look at that for a minute, because that's kind of a different thing. And you say, okay, what in the world is this? Well, these are messages, okay, that are associated with certain activities when we use the database. That's all they are. I'll close it off. And then we have our suppliers. So we've looked at a table. Let's go look at some forms. And this is a customer detail form. Let's look at it. Open it up. And you'll see right off the bat, you know, when we had the tables open, it was just row after row after row after row of stuff. Imagine if you were just inputting data in there. It gets pretty, it would just become a little bit, drive you nutty. So we have this thing called a form that allows us to input data into a table. Now, forms are also very, very helpful, because if we want to use them to handle, for example, inbound calls, we can use forms to talk to a customer. Let's say that this Elizabeth Anderson that we're looking at here calls in, and we have some notes on Elizabeth. Like, Elizabeth likes dogs, and she has a dog named Toby, and she's a big fan of some sports team. She loves the Thunder. Okay, you've got all these notes. You've culled these, okay? And so when Elizabeth calls in, you say, well, what do you think about how the Thunder are doing and all this? So if you have, when you have, especially with business-to-business relationships, these notes become things whereby you establish a rapport with the customer. Okay. Now, in other transactions, these notes will be, let's say, for example, you're buying a house and you're financing it, and you're dealing with a mortgage company. Okay. They'll have notes in here so that when you call in, they go, oh yeah, I see. Okay. Yeah. We have your income information. Yeah. We have, but well, we're going to need this W-2. And we also need you to go over here and get this. And that's how they access that information, things like notes. Okay. So a form is it's an extremely versatile tool, because it lets us input data to populate tables. All right. And it also allows us to quickly access, if you've ever if you've ever gotten something to the mail and you call into a call center, they already have all the data about you that they can get. And so they'll say, well, okay, or say a credit card company, you've got some issue, something, and you're verifying your name and phone number and address and all that. That's in there. They just make sure that they have that. Okay, so form. So that's another piece of this puzzle called a database. And then we have the queries. Now this is where the action is, because this is where we start to extract data from the table that we've stored in a database. Okay. Now I want to show you something here for just a second. And once you look at it, your head will probably explode. I understand. Most databases, if you have the proper authority, let me stop for a moment. Access lets you see the world of a database administrator. They say, well, why should I do that? Well, listen, one of these days you'll live or die with those people. And so you want to understand, you want to be able to think like them. One of the key things I hope we do with you is that I don't care if you're a management major, an accounting major, your finance, if for you to move up the ranks, you're going to have to be able to effectively relate to people who are outside of your discipline. If you're an accounting major, okay, and you think everybody who works in marketing is stupid because they don't have a degree in accounting, you're not going to go far, because of those people, your life is in their hands. Everything starts with a sale. And if those people in marketing don't think that you're important, you're just some geek that does numbers, well, the first time you mess up something on an account, we'll all find out how bad things can get. So it takes that approach. That's the only way I know for you to start to develop it. And if your faculty aren't encouraging you, let me say, I'm encouraging you to think like that. You've got to be able to relate to and understand the importance of every function in a company, organization. Let's look at this. This is our customers extended query, and we'll open this up. Okay. And here in this query, we pulled, we went and we used the table. All right. Now let's go down to the design view, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And we got every bit of, we used a technique there called file as, and we used a search function to get everything from the customer's table. And we got their contact name and the file as, the ID, etc., everything we wanted to know. Close this for a second, well, for more than a second. And come up here to the toolbar, okay, and click on it. And you're going to see a thing called Database Tools, that tab. Click on the relationships. And here you see all the way that these tables are connected with each other. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as we move through these cases. But this also shows you the information flow. Okay, and we'll see what are these little symbols here. But this shows you how we've taken these tables and we've related them to each other. That's why we call it a relational database. And we also have some other tools, and I'm going to close that off for a minute. Okay, and I'm going to click on this Customers Extended. I'm going to click on Database Tools again. And you see the little thing that says Object Dependencies, click on that. And this will tell me I've got this query here called Customers Extended, okay? The Object Dependencies tool lets me see, okay, what objects depend on me, okay? And then the objects that I depend upon. So if you want to know, where did you get that information? Those are the objects on which you depend. Well, who down the line is going to need information? Oh, wow, you can see them. So it helps you get a sense of how information is flowing through that database. Okay. Now, we'll close that off and we're going to come down here and we're going to look at inventory sold. I'm going to open that up. And then let's push back the navigation bar. And here we have the product ID and the quantity that we sold. Now I want you to notice something. You see the drop-down menu? We have that drop-down menu because we have created a table. We've created a lookup table that allows us to say, okay, I can just easily choose the product. And let's go down to the design view of this query. Okay. And we have some things like an expression, and we'll talk about these. Transaction type. And you can see the table that we use to do it. Now, below that is a thing called the SQL level. That's a structured query language. And we won't work with it too much, if at all, in this course. It's pretty simple. And we're going back up to the data sheet view. Okay? Well, let's close this off. And then finally, let's go to the navigation pane again. And let's look at reports. And you can see we have some reports like a customer address book, a customer phone book, etc., a monthly sales report. If I'm interested in saying, okay, let's take the monthly sales report, where did that come from? I'm going to click on that and I'll look at the object dependencies that it will tell me. It came from a query called sales analysis. Okay. Now, I want to go back and I'm going to finish this up and mention something that I think it's important for us to always be understanding. Let's choose. I'm going to find I want to find a table that would really lend itself to this. We have product orders. Let's open that up. Okay. Now this tells us everything we want to know about every single product order. Now, one of the things that we'll talk about is if I have something like this, all right, what could I do with it? Well, one thing you could do with it would be to export it to, say, Excel, or you could put it into a pivot table to look for some patterns in the data. Put it into Excel so you could chart it. Put it into Excel so you could do some computations on these quantities and these unit prices and any discounts. That's why I told you earlier we had the development of these so-called hybrid projects, because somebody gets something like this, okay? And this is what we call a view. We haven't changed the table we drew this from. We just took a picture of, we ran the query, made some choices about what we wanted to get, and we took a picture of it, okay? And So for all intents and purposes, I'm going to throw this into Excel so I can really analyze this information much easier than I could in trying to mess around with running some additional queries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because remember, I want to use data to get information so I can make decisions. Well, so you say, well, how would I do that? Well, we'll close this off. And I'll go back over to the navigation pane. And I'll simply click export and I'll send it to Excel. I could send it to another Access file. I could put it into XML or as a Word document if I wanted to create, say, a mailing list. Okay? Well, I think that you've pretty much taken quite I think we put more than our toes in the water today as far as databases. I will close this off, all right? And we'll go back here, and of course, this is for both sections for April the 2nd, next Tuesday. So I'll post this once I've processed this and put it into a YouTube video. I'll post it in each of your announcement sections, and that's what you should view for Tuesday, okay? And then on Thursday, we'll take a look at our first database case. Okay, I think that'll do it for now. And I'll stop the share and then end the meeting and record it and get it processed.